Welcome back to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. Expats is a new series on Amazon Prime. It's so far consisted of 3 episodes. The Expatriates, which it's based on, is a novel by Janice Y.K. Lee, which was published in 2016. It tells the story of 3 women, Hillary, Margaret, Mercy, and how each of them copes with their own misery while living as expatriates overseas in Hong Kong. Margaret is so unhappy in general that she secretly purchases a second apartment to get away from her family, but then her youngest son, G, or Gus in the television show, gets kidnapped, which only adds to her melancholy. Then Hillary is married to a milquetoast guy named David until he leaves her out of the blue. She spirals a bit, then gets hooked on some online forums and attempts to adopt a kid named Julian. That's not in the television show. Mercy goes from a selfish kid, post-Columbia grad with rich friends but no money to her own, to becoming a nanny in charge of G/Gus when he goes missing. Then she starts having an affair with Hillary's husband. The story stews in this simmering broth of empty, lonely feelings, switching points of view every chapter between the 3 until their worlds eventually collide together. But the TV show, how this translates to that, is Nicole Kidman on screen complaining for 3 hours. She complains about her kids. She complains about her nanny. She complains about missing work. She complains about expatriates in general, other wives, her husband, the police. It's exhausting. I'm going to give you the Wikipedia because I know you did the research for this show, but This is the Wikipedia for Expats. Set in Hong Kong, the plot orbits the abrupt disappearance of Margaret's youngest son during a nighttime market escapade, the convergence of 3 American women, their clandestine affairs against the backdrop of the 2014 umbrella movement protests in Hong Kong. And I knew it was 2014 in the book too because the Malaysian Flight 370, yes, March 8th, 2014. This is after G gets kidnapped. They're watching it on the TV, and in the pilot episode, they actually watch it as well.
This is said not to portray Hong Kong in the best light, though, which is strange because they filmed the series there.
The series is very little about the actual idea of expats or expatriates. It's a misnomer. The title does not fit the series. It's all about these women.
But isn't it about feminism also? Because this is a show that was created by a woman. Even the person Lulu Lane created, directed, executively produced it. It stars women. It was written by a woman, like you said, Janice Y.K. Lee. She was a graduate of Harvard, and the Expatriates was actually only her second book that she ever made.
You'd think so, right? Because every single chapter of the book has it either be from Margaret's perspective, Hillary's, or Mercy's.
I even have the themes here, challenges of motherhood.
But when we start the TV show, then we start seeing David's point of view. And we start, the husbands were always orbital to the women. Like, they never had their own say. It was always through the lives of the women. But then when you get to the TV show, suddenly David's got his own scene. And you're seeing people outside of those sphere, which just goes to show that I think that the writers knew that they were in trouble when they started this series. So I'm going to give my verdict early this time.
Okay.
The show is way too long. They're doing the story wrong. And even if they had been faithful to the source material, which they're only about 50% of, sidetrack, I just finished Boy Swallows Universe, that television show. And I remember in our podcast, I said this was an extremely faithful adaptation.
Right.
It retains that throughout the entire series. It does speed up at the end. It rushes the ending too much, which I find a fault of Boy Swallows Universe. But it still keeps up like 80% of what Trent Dalton originally wanted for his thing. This is only 50%. So much has been changed. They started the pilot at the climax of the book.
Oh, okay. So they do like a
they go 75% in. No. Don't start. The whole entire pilot is the climax of the book.
Oh, what?
No setup. So it doesn't have the same like hit that it would because you don't know anything that you're watching.
It just throws you in the middle of things.
So the entire book is between the 3 women, but they don't really merge. Their lives are not completely so Hillary knows Margaret, and but they're not super big friends, and Margaret knows Mercy because she hires her, but that all happens throughout the course of the book, and then they only end up being in the same place at the same time at Clark's 50th, which is his 50th birthday, which is well after G or Gus gets kidnapped. And this is like, again, the climax of the story, but that's where we start the entire pilot and where the pilot takes place. So if you're a new viewer and you aren't aware of the story, it doesn't make any sense.
I was afraid that you were going to say it was too long because this is 6 episodes, but even the penultimate series, the penultimate episode is 96 minutes long.
It's too long, and they're also making shortcuts. And it's
doing both.
Yeah, it's doing both things wrong because Mercy was never hired by Margaret in the television show. In the book series, it makes sense because she meets this new girl, this young, like 26-year-old or 24-year-old post-grad on a boat. She's getting along well with her kids. She says, "Oh, you could be my nanny." They end up going to Seoul, Korea on a vacation. After a little while, she's starting to have her doubts about Mercy. Margaret is. And that's when G gets kidnapped. No, that's not how they do it here at all. It's just a Hong Kong market. It's just a Hong Kong market. This is a trial run for Mercy. They literally don't even know each other that well, and that's when Gus gets kidnapped.
Yeah, it seems like a smaller scale also. You're talking about like a trip that they're making, and this is just a normal market.
Well, like I'm saying, they skip so far ahead. Gus doesn't get kidnapped until halfway through the book. It's really not just about this kidnapping, and the show decides to make
centers around it. I know that Ji Young Yu, who played Mercy Cho, said that she read the book before she saw the script, and said
Mercy's the best character. I think
she said Mercy's childhood is much slower in the novel than it is in the series.
She's also more of a jerk. Like, I don't like her character in the book at all, and I actually find her the most tolerable of the 3 in the television show.
So that was a good change,
yes.
I guess?
Well, yes, that was the one pro that I had for the changes that they were making. Also, the market scene in Hong Kong was kind of fun because they did a time-lapse thing in the second episode when they show how the next day things were just back to normal there, because that's a very normal thing. People can go missing. But in the book, there's this moment where Margaret realizes her kid is missing. This is page like 85, and it says, "It was like one of those movies where the camera swung around 360, dizzyingly relentless." And I was waiting for that to actually happen because it's like written for the director to just do.
And they didn't do it.
They did it, but they did it with Mercy as opposed to Margaret. Mercy's the one who originally realizes that G or Gus is missing. And in the book, Margaret leaves Mercy for like 2 seconds to go into a Starbucks or something. She comes out, and then that's where she's like, "Hey, where's my son?" And then Mercy's like, "Oh, no, he was right here." That's not, again...
Well, it also just makes more sense that they would show the moms.
She's more responsible in this, in the TV series.
But it would make more sense that they would show the mom's reaction, Margaret, with the 360 camera angle than Mercy. It just doesn't... Why would we care more about Mercy's reaction to Margaret's son missing?
Mercy was trying to get the job, and suddenly she feels responsible for having lost a full human being. Like, I understand where the misery of the show incubates, why it's so glum. I just don't see the point in it. Like, why we're getting so much of that. Hillary and Margaret are suddenly best friends in the television series. Again, a shortcut so that they can show their connection versus having to describe it throughout. Like, there'd be, in the book, it's kind of weird because Hillary just exists in her own realm. She doesn't really have a connection to the other two besides David being friends with Clark, Hillary's husband, Margaret's husband. But in this, they're besties. They talk together. By the end of the first episode, they're dancing in a takeout center together. David is also still with Hillary by the time of Clark's 50th.
Is that not how it was?
He leaves her I think for a full several months at least, because he starts dating Mercy Hillary doesn't even know any of this. I think he dumps her through like email. He's like, "I'm just not coming home."
Through email?
Yes.
That is a trash move.
None of that is happening here. He's still with her for a while, and then he ends up having the affair with Mercy because he was one of the suspects for Gus because he was at a bar at the time of Gus's disappearance. It doesn't really make that much sense whatsoever when you look at just David's point of view, because he says that he didn't have any doubts about his marriage until Hillary said it paused when she was asked where his whereabouts were the day Gus went missing, as if she didn't trust him. In the book, it's this full undercurrent of like their marriage was in trouble for a long time, and Hillary just hadn't been aware of that.
I have some themes of the book, and I was thinking I could maybe talk about them, and then you could say how they relate. We've already kind of talked a little bit about challenges of motherhood, but the search for identity in a foreign environment.
Well, the motherhood thing's also interesting because Hillary, like I said, in the book, the entire storyline for her is her and Julian. There's this kid that she's trying to adopt. The entire story, and what she's done is she hasn't told the adoption center that David and her have broken up or are separated currently, which would definitely stop her from being able to adopt him. She's also getting an extra, because she's an American, she's getting like extra give where she's able to rent out Julian every other day or something and like just test him out, kind of like if it was a puppy. And so like, I don't know how you're supposed to feel exactly about her when you're reading the story, but it doesn't put a great light on her. In this rendition, I feel like they saw that. They realized that it was going to be really hard to make Hillary a pleasant character if they continued that story. So they completely got rid of Julian. So far in the story, there has been no adoption. She doesn't want to be a mom. I think that might change by the end of the story, because they have to at least try to make it somewhat similar to the book. But right now, Hillary's character is probably the furthest distant from her version in the story.
Well, and Nicole Kidman, she's made the transition into TV series. I know Far Way Down was 15 years ago, but that came out a couple months ago. Special Ops Linus, Nine Perfect Strangers, Expats. Currently, she has 5 shows in development that she is either executively producing, acting in, or both. But
I think she was miscast here. I think they found out that they had Nicole Kidman, and so what they decided to do was write the show around her.
Well, Nicole Kidman was the one name that they had, even starting back talks for developing the TV series back in February of 2017. But people have pointed out that she is almost being typecast now as the rich mother character. She was that way in Big Little Lies. She was that way in The Undoing, I think, which came out in 2020. And it just seems like she continually plays these types of roles.
Maybe, but even in the book series, I think that Margaret, she just came across differently. I was more sympathetic to her in the book than I am watching her here. It feels like every scene she's just, as I said, complaining, paranoid. They also make her kids way more annoying than they were in the book.
So like WandaVision.
Like what do they say? They sound like squonking donkeys. And I think they're only doing that to try to give Margaret some sort of excuse to be the way that she is. To be like, oh, even though she has a nanny for all, you know what it feels like? It feels like watching Parasite, but the rich family who has everything catered for them, just watching them be sad about stuff for no reason.
And you're supposed to feel for them.
It's kind of like that in the book too, where these expatriates are all feeling kind of distanced from their country. So, but at the same time, they're getting everything that they want. People are folding over backwards to give them every single thing that they could possibly want. And they feel a little spoiled by that, which they should. And so a lot of them want to return home. And so the book goes more into the idea of why being an expatriate is sort of weird when you're doing it. Because everybody's rich there. It's kind of like its own country club. I think Clark's 50th is at a country club. But the point that I think Margaret and Hillary are really there for is they're having these like sort of midlife crises in the middle of feeling like they're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I just rewatched Succession, and the part of the satire of that series is that even though they're all rich assholes, you're not really supposed to care for them.
But this isn't like the asshole part is like a lowercase asshole, because she is aware of the spoiledness of people like her who get there. And so she was trying to avoid that. That's part of the reason she rented this second apartment before G even goes missing, where she wants to feel more like a local. She doesn't want to feel like one of the regular expatriates who are just living in their own bubble. But then once G does go missing, in the book, she gets super paranoid to the point where she is working with the cops every single day. She refuses to leave Seoul, Korea. The rest of her family goes back to Hong Kong. And it takes a really long time for them to sort of mend things. In this, she's starting to suspect Hillary's neighbor they're presenting it like a mystery, like one day we're going to find out what happens to G/Gus.
Right.
And if people are watching that with that expectation, they're going to be severely disappointed because that's not what the story is about, but they're kind of billing it like it is. So they're selling you a false bill of goods, which kind of upsets me because I read the book to this damn thing. I spent my time and effort doing that. Then I had to watch the series that's just taking 50% of it and really kind of murdering and whatever there was. Like, I wasn't the biggest fan of the book, but at the same time, it was so much better than this.
So yeah, Janice Y.K. Lee, it doesn't seem like she's connected too much to the series. I know that she wrote the final episode.
It feels like a Percy Jackson situation going on.
Well, yeah, so Lulu Lang, that person directed like 5 shorts, and then she didn't really become famous until 2019 when she came out with like a semi-autobiographical comedy called The Farewell. And it seems like when she came out with The Farewell, which got critical acclaim, she's Chinese-American, and it was about Chinese-American
This is the
family.
Director or the writer
This
of the
is
show?
This is the creator, director, executive producer. She even wrote the 1st and 5th episode for this series. It seemed like because Nicole Kidman came to her and said, "Can you do this series?" She was like, "Yes, but I kind of want to have free reign," and Nicole Kidman gave that to her.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like a lot of people signed on because of Lulu Lang. I wasn't hearing too many people aside from Ji Young Yu, and I also know Nicole Kidman read the book, but it didn't sound like they were really copying it that much.
Again, 50% of it's there. There are some conversations that have direct quotes that they're even saying. I think the interview process to Mercy was going sort of according to the thing. It wasn't until they reached the Hong Kong market where I was like, oh, you're kidnapping him before she's even part of the family.
Mm-hmm.
That was a little strange. And David's storyline is so offbeat because or off track of what he was in the book, because in the book he was confused as like this milquetoast guy. Hillary just was like, oh man, he's just like any other husband. In this, he's kind of like an ex-alcoholic. Hillary feels like she's being put upon because even their sex life is terrible. They go through the motions of trying to give these women more excuses to be the way they are. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because when it's Janice Y.K. Lee, the writer of The Expatriates,
yes,
very, very good at writing. The plot itself wasn't there, but because she could write a stream of consciousness and she wrote women better than any of the other books, like Harlan Coben, obviously, even with Fool Me Once in a main character, that's a woman who was not written as well as a woman that was written by Janice Y.K. Lee. Same goes for Trent Dalton, but he mostly wrote from Eli's perspective in that, so it didn't play as much a factor. So that was what she had going for it. When she wrote a stream of consciousness in their head, even if they weren't great characters, even if they weren't good people, in this, they have to speak those lines, and it just doesn't come across.
It doesn't transfer from book to screen.
Yeah, and then also the shortcuts that I was talking about, making Hillary and Margaret already so close, feels like such an excuse to try to give them more connection than they actually had.
I kept reading about a postcard twist.
This is part of the mystery where it's like, oh man, maybe G was kidnapped by the neighbor of Hillary's. She goes and breaks into Hillary's dead neighbor's apartment to find a postcard that shows a picture of a vacation they were on, a while back in the show. Again, everything that we see in the book is only represented in flashbacks if it was the first part of the book. Mm-hmm. So we only get a flashback scene of them at this vacation that they had earlier. And so immediately Margaret thinks maybe this guy was actually there. Maybe he was stalking us, which doesn't add up to anything that you should be expecting. The thing that really upsets me about this is that the book is set up so straightforward where every person gets their own chapter, where that's all they had to do for this television series to make it succeed.
Like Skins?
Yes, they could have had each episode, the first 3 episodes, Margaret's episode, just combine those chapters together, show her story, have the other characters maybe show up, but not in her direct world, unless you're talking about Mercy when she's getting hired. In the 2nd episode, go to Mercy's point of view, describe her character, really do a deep dive. 3rd episode, do the same with Hillary. Make it a character story. Make it fun that way. 4th episode, that's when Gus could get kidnapped. Then spend the last few talking about the ramifications of that. It literally was kind of written to be that way, and yet they they just completely ignored that. So the inherent book flaw that they wouldn't have been able to fix is that, again, with Gus, it's more about motherhood than it is about solving his mystery. And because we get so many detective series, I think the immediate consumer or audience member is going to be like, where is he? Show us where he is, or else I'm not going to feel closure. Yeah. That's why I think that I'm not the only one who's going to give this a bad review. And I'm going to personally give it a 3 out of 10.
A 3 out of 10. Okay.
So I don't recommend it to anyone unless they are diehard Nicole Kidman fans. It's not the plot holes that are killing it. It's the lack of plot. So, yeah.
Okay, so it has a 5.9 on IMDb with around 2,000 reviews and 82% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, but the audience score is 51%. So that's not 30%, but it is kind of still bad.
I wonder how many of those critics actually read the book it was based on.
Well, you might agree with The Cider, because The Cider said skip it. Entertainment Weekly rated the series a C+ and said that it is not a missing child mystery, and like life, the series doesn't offer viewers clear resolutions or easy closure.
Yeah, and neither does the book, though, because it was never supposed to be about... That's okay, so the book only ever identifies her kid as G, partially to say this isn't a story about him. In her mind, she never literally says her kid's name. They always just... And within the first 5 minutes of the show, it's Gus. Suddenly his name is Gus. And that was my first indication of like, okay, well, this is clearly not being as subtle as what the book wanted.
It reminds me of MacGyver. I know that when they did the original MacGyver series, they kept his name until the very last episode. And when they did the remake of MacGyver, within the first 5 minutes, they said his first name.
Yeah. No, I can see that comparison. Yeah, that works.
I know that RogerEbert.com gave it 3 out of 4 stars, and Richard Roper gave the series 3.5 out of 4 stars when he was writing for the Chicago Sun-Times. People are complimenting the acting, and I think that, yeah, like you're saying, people that read the book aren't enjoying it, but people who are just watching the series, if you were just watching it, you're not comparing it to the book.
No, I would still
terrible.
Hate it because it lingers on these long scenes. Like, again, Hillary having sex with her husband for a minute just to show that Hillary isn't having a good time. Like, she's just sitting there waiting for him to come. Then you have a scene where Mercy and David are bonding over the fact that they were both blamed for Gus's kidnapping. The thing is that David was never really blamed for that, and yet they're using that as his whole entire inspiration for his midlife crisis. Now, I know I shouldn't be comparing it to the book if I'm trying to prove that even the show by itself is bad. They do these lingering shots where they just stay on traffic for a good 30 seconds at a time. Yeah. It feels like even if they were to cut this down like 30 minutes to 30-minute episodes, maybe then you would get a better consolidated plot. But the storyline of like, okay, so Nicole Kidman or Margaret, she goes to her kids and starts taking pictures of them because, like, naked, because she wants to know where their birthmarks and stuff are in case one of them goes missing. They do address that in the book, but it made a lot more sense there because she was so worried. In this, she scars them because they're like running around being like, why is mom trying to take pictures of us nakedly? You know, that type of thing. Yeah. So it's very awkward, and they didn't need to do it that way. So I just disagree with the direction of it, the writing of it. It feels cheap.
I know that there were reports that Lulu Lang and Nicole Kidman were kind of butting heads. There was even someone who said that Nicole Kidman at certain points on set walked off. So I know that there was some said that there was tension between the two.
Are we TMZ now? Is this gossip rumors? Nicole Kidman's character is given the most scenes to kind of milk that sadness. So I don't know if she wanted more of them or if she wanted less of them.
Would it have worked better as a film? Because,
yes.
Yeah, because Brian T., the person who played Clark Wu, said that they had one director and they tried to shoot it like it was a 6.5-hour movie as opposed to a TV show. And Nicole Kidman said something very similar. But maybe, like you're saying, it would have been able to cut down and consolidate it into like a 2-hour and 30-minute type of thing.
Think of any story that you would ever want to see. Do you really want them to start at the climax of the story?
Of the book.
Not for a 5-second glimpse, but for the entire first episode and then play backtrack to it? Like, unless you do that extremely smart, it's going to backfire because you've taken the best part of the book, the part that everybody's waiting for, and just given it away. And so now what are we working for? I honestly don't know. I was upset when I had to tune into episode 3. We do the podcast where we go the latest episode. Yeah. So I had to watch 1, 2, and 3 because we got to this one late. I really wish I could have just stopped at 2 because I had my opinion set there. 3 took it from a 4 to a 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it even made it worse. Okay. I'll end it with this. Jack Huston, he worked with Lulu Lang on her first film, Posthumous, which came out in 2014. He gained 30 pounds for the role of David Starr, but he just was supposed to get 20 pounds, so he overate.
Yeah. I'll give you 2 other facts before we end it. One is that they had a character who Mercy is dating at the same time that she's dating David, named Charlie in the book. He's supposed to be this nerdy guy that she knew from Colombia, that she never would have given the time of day, but now that she's more mature and that she's dealt with this whole Gus thing, she's just deciding to date him in Hong Kong. Turns out in this version of the story, Charlie is now a woman, and she meets her on a subway. They have no past connection. Charlie is no longer at all a nerd, but like in the hype sphere, like she's one of the cool kids, you know? And so Mercy is now just dating her at the same time that she's dating David. They completely change. They keep the character's name, except for G, but then they just change who they are.
Yeah.
Other than that, though, the peak, Montauk, and mid-levels, that was sort of a synopsis of all 3 of them together. I know it was kind of cluttered.
I think that the series was more focused on trying to bring representation because that's what Lulu Lang, that's what The Farewell was all about. It was even one of Obama's favorite films that year. But
then why split the point of views? I just don't understand. You had a book that was written from the point of view of all women, and now you're giving scenes to the guys. It doesn't make any sense. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.